The Forbidden Archive. The excavation site on Varath 9 had been dead for 3 months before Dr. Kaveth found the door. The planet itself had been dead much longer, perhaps 50,000 years. Its atmosphere stripped away by some ancient cataclysm that left only ruins and dust. Kaveth was a Zilarian, his crystalline body reflecting the harsh light of the system's red dwarf sun as he worked. His team had been cataloging the remains of what appeared to be a minor outpost. Nothing special, nothing that would change history. Then his scanner detected the anomaly beneath the central plaza. The door was seamless, made of a material that his equipment couldn't identify. It bore no markings, no controls, no indication of how it might open. Kaveth spent 2 days analyzing it before he realized the door wasn't locked. It was waiting for someone with the right genetic signature, the right biological frequency, the right consciousness pattern. When he finally touched it with his bare, crystalline hand, the door recognized something in his molecular structure and opened without sound. The chamber beyond was vast, stretching down into darkness that his lights couldn't fully penetrate. But the walls were alive with data streams, holographic projections that activated as he entered, responding to his presence. The language was Old Galactic, the root tongue from which all modern council languages had evolved. Kaveth could read it barely, his translation implant struggling with syntax that was older than recorded history. The first files he accessed were mundane. Supply records, personnel rosters, maintenance logs for systems that no longer existed. Then he found the archive core and everything changed. The hologram that appeared was of a being unlike any species in the council database. It stood on 2 legs like many species did, but its proportions were strange, its face oddly smooth, its body lacking any natural armor or weapons. Yet something about its eyes, even in hologram form, made Kaveth's crystalline structure vibrate with instinctive unease. The being spoke, and the translation came through clearly. "We are the architects. We have ruled this galaxy for 10 million years, bringing order from chaos, civilization from barbarism, peace from endless war. But we have failed. The enemy comes and we cannot stop it. We are not strong enough, not ruthless enough, not desperate enough to do what must be done. So we begin our final project." The hologram shifted, showing a vast laboratory complex, genetic sequencers the size of moons, computational systems that made council technology look like children's toys. The architects were creating something, pouring all their knowledge, all their resources, all their desperate hope into one last creation. They showed images of thousands of worlds, each one evaluated and rejected. Too peaceful, too stable, too safe. They needed the opposite. They needed hell. The image changed to show a planet of extraordinary beauty and extraordinary horror, vast oceans filled with creatures that could swallow ships, continents covered in forests where every plant could kill, where every animal was predator or prey or both, deserts that burned hot enough to melt metal, frozen wastelands where the wind could flay flesh from bone, volcanic regions that turned the sky black with ash, weather systems that spawned storms powerful enough to level cities. And in this crucible, they would forge their weapon. Project Genesis, the architect's voice continued. A world designed to produce the ultimate survival species. We have seeded it with the most aggressive genetic templates from across the galaxy, modified and enhanced them, set them in competition with each other in an environment that shows no mercy. Natural selection accelerated to its logical extreme. In 10 million years, perhaps less, this world will produce what we could not. A species that knows only struggle, that sees every challenge as something to overcome, that never stops, never surrenders, never accepts defeat. They will be our successors, our children, our weapon against the darkness. Kaveth watched as the hologram showed the architect's plan. They would guide this species subtly, leaving markers and clues, ensuring they develop technology and curiosity and the ability to reach the stars. But they would not make them soft. The world itself would be their teacher, harsh and unforgiving, shaping them into exactly what was needed. The architects called the world by a designation in their language. When Kaveth's translator processed it, the meaning came through with crystal clarity. Death World Prime, the crucible of warriors. The coordinates followed, burned into the archive with unmistakable precision. Kaveth's hands shook as he checked them against modern star charts. The world still existed. It was inhabited, and the Galactic Council knew it by another name: Earth, home of humanity. Kaveth stood in the ancient chamber, his mind refusing to process what he had discovered. Humans had joined the Galactic Council only 15 years ago, presenting themselves as peaceful explorers from a garden world, a species that had barely survived its own primitive wars and now sought friendship among the stars. They were weak compared to most Council species, their technology decades behind, their military force laughable. They had no natural weapons, no armor, no enhanced senses. They were soft and fragile, requiring specific atmospheric conditions, specific temperature ranges, specific gravity levels. They seemed harmless, but the Architect's archive told a different story. Kaveth accessed more files, finding detailed analyses of Earth's environment, gravity at the high end of habitable range, producing species with dense bone structure and powerful musculature, atmospheric oxygen content at near-toxic levels, allowing for sustained high-energy activity, predator-to-prey ratios that forced constant evolutionary pressure, weather patterns so violent that survival required both intelligence and adaptability, bacterial and viral diversity that created immune systems capable of fighting off almost any pathogen, and, perhaps most telling, a rotation and orbital pattern that created regular cycles of resource scarcity, forcing species to plan, to store, to prepare for hardship. Every aspect of Earth was designed to produce survivors, and humanity had survived there for 200,000 years, climbing from primitive hunters to technological civilization, despite obstacles that would have killed most Council species in a single generation. They had fought ice ages and plagues, megafauna predators and rival human tribes, volcanic winters and asteroid impacts. They had survived everything their world threw at them and emerged stronger each time. Kaveth found himself laughing, a sound like wind chimes in a storm. The Council thought they understood humans. They saw a species that ate dead animal flesh and somehow considered this normal. They saw a species that could survive injuries that would kill most beings, that could run for hours without rest, that could adapt to almost any environment within a single generation. They saw these things and called them curiosities, evolutionary quirks from an unusually harsh world. They never wondered what it meant that humans considered their world beautiful, that they spoke of Earth with love and longing, that they called it home despite its horrors. The archive held more secrets. The architects had left monitoring systems throughout the galaxy, automated stations that watched and waited, sending reports back to receivers that might never be checked. Kaveth accessed these reports, watching 50,000 years of galactic history unfold in compressed data streams. He saw the architect's civilization reach its peak and then suddenly, catastrophically vanish. He saw the species that would become the Council emerge from the ashes, primitive and scattered, building civilizations in the ruins of something they couldn't understand. And he saw the defense network. The architects had built it in their final years. Massive weapons platforms hidden in deep space, quantum shields around key systems, automated dreadnoughts that patrolled the galactic rim. The Council had discovered some of these installations over the millennia, studied them, marveled at technology they couldn't replicate. They had assumed the architects built these defenses against some conventional enemy, perhaps a rival civilization from another galaxy. They were wrong. The reports showed the truth. The consuming darkness, the architects called it, not a species or empire, but something else. Something that existed in the space between realities. Something that fed on consciousness itself. It had come before, had consumed entire regions of space, had destroyed civilizations that made the architects look primitive. The architects had fought it for 1,000 years and barely managed to drive it back, to seal the rifts through which it entered normal space. But the seals were temporary, the rifts would reopen, and the darkness would return. The defense network was never meant to stop it, only to slow it down, to buy time for Project Genesis to mature, for humanity to develop, for the weapon to be ready. Kaveth found the timeline calculations and felt his crystalline structure go cold. The network had been failing for the last 500 years. Systems going offline, weapons platforms running out of power, shields degrading. The Council had noticed some of this, but they attributed it to simple mechanical failure over time. They didn't know they were watching their protection crumble, and the darkness was coming back. The archive held sensor data from the deep space monitoring stations, showing reality itself beginning to fracture at the galactic rim, small rifts at first, barely detectable but growing larger each year. The architect's calculations suggested the darkness would reach inhabited space within 3 to 5 months. 3 to 5 months before the war, the architects had prepared for 50,000 years ago, finally arrived. Kaveth stood alone in the ancient chamber, surrounded by the ghosts of a dead civilization, holding knowledge that would shatter the galaxy's understanding of itself. Humanity wasn't some random species that happened to develop spaceflight. They were a designed weapon, created by the greatest civilization in galactic history, engineered specifically to fight an enemy that the Council didn't even know existed. Every human trait that seemed strange or disturbing, their aggression and persistence, their pack bonding and tribal loyalty, their ability to thrive in chaos and their refusal to accept impossible situations, all of it was intentional. All of it was necessary. He thought about the humans he had met during his years in Council space. Ambassador Marcus Jang, always smiling, always diplomatic, always seeming to defer to Council wisdom while somehow getting exactly what humanity wanted in every negotiation. Captain Jennifer Torres, who commanded Earth's flagship, with an easy confidence that made veteran Council officers nervous. Dr. James Wright, whose research into quantum mechanics had advanced the field further in 10 years than Council scientists had managed in 1,000. They all seemed so normal, so harmless, so eager to learn and cooperate. But Kaveth had seen their eyes when they thought no one was watching. He had seen the way they assessed every room they entered, cataloging exits and threats and advantages. He had seen how they moved, with a grace that came from bodies built for pursuit and combat. He had heard them laugh about Earth's dangers, casually mentioning animals that could kill with a single bite, weather that could freeze flesh in minutes, diseases that killed millions despite their advanced medicine. They spoke of these horrors the way other species spoke of minor inconveniences. What would the Council do with this knowledge? Kaveth already knew the answer. They would panic. They would see humanity not as allies but as a threat, a weapon pointed at their hearts, a species designed for war living among them. They would demand restrictions, controls, perhaps even quarantine. They would do everything possible to keep humanity weak and contained, never realizing they were dooming themselves in the process. Kaveth copied the archive to his personal storage, encrypting it with codes that only he knew. Then he made a decision that would change his life and perhaps the galaxy. He would report the finding to the Council, but he would withhold the most dangerous information. He would give them enough to understand the threat of the consuming darkness, but not enough to understand what humanity truly was. Let them figure it out themselves if they were smart enough. Let them decide how to react when the truth finally became undeniable. He took one last look at the architect's hologram, frozen in its eternal message. We leave you this burden and this hope. If you find this archive, then Project Genesis has succeeded. The children of the Crucible are ready. Trust them, arm them, follow them. They will do what we could not. They will win where we failed. They are the future we sacrificed everything to create. Kaveth turned and walked back toward the surface, carrying knowledge that weighed heavier than planets. Behind him, the archive waited in darkness, its secrets preserved for whoever might come next. The countdown had begun. The galaxy's long peace was ending, and humanity, whether they knew it yet or not, was about to fulfill the purpose for which they had been created 50,000 years ago. 3 months. That was all the time they had. 3 months before the consuming darkness reached the first inhabited systems. 3 months before the Council learned what true war meant. 3 months before humanity stopped pretending to be harmless and became what the architects had designed them to be. The weapon was ready. The only question was whether the galaxy would accept it before it was too late. The Awakening. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened within 18 hours of Dr. Kaveth's report. Representatives from all 47 member species filled the grand chamber, their confusion and concern palpable in the air. Kaveth had shared enough to terrify them, speaking of an ancient enemy called the Consuming Darkness, of failing defense networks, of 3 months until catastrophe arrived. But he had held back the most explosive revelation, waiting to see how events would unfold. Ambassador Marcus Jang arrived precisely on time, as he always did. He was a middle-aged human with graying hair and eyes that seemed perpetually amused by some private joke. He wore the simple blue uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps, unadorned except for a small silver pin in the shape of his planet. He nodded politely to the other ambassadors as he took his position at the human podium, Showing no sign that this session was anything other than routine, Speaker Thevron, a Menthari with 4 arms and a voice like grinding stones, called the session to order. Ambassador Jung, we have grave news. Dr. Kaveth has discovered evidence of an ancient threat to our galaxy, something called the consuming darkness. His findings suggest this entity will reach inhabited space within 3 months. We have called this emergency session to coordinate our defensive response. Marcus tilted his head slightly, his expression one of polite interest. The consuming darkness, you said? Could you describe this threat in more detail? Thevron gestured to Kaveth, who stood and activated a holographic display. The images showed the data from the ancient archive, sensor readings of reality fracturing, the calculations predicting the rift's expansion. The chamber fell silent as the assembled species absorbed the magnitude of what they faced. This enemy destroyed the architects, Kaveth explained, his crystalline voice resonating with barely controlled fear. They were the most advanced civilization in galactic history, and they could only drive it back temporarily. We have 3 months before it returns, and our technology is centuries behind what the architects possessed. We are not prepared for this. Marcus studied the display with an expression that made Kaveth's structure vibrate with sudden unease. The human's face had changed subtly, the polite mask slipping just enough to reveal something calculating beneath. When he spoke, his voice carried a different quality, harder and more direct than his usual diplomatic tone. Speaker Thevron, with respect, I believe Dr. Kaveth's report is incomplete. He has told you about the consuming darkness, but he has not told you about Project Genesis. The chamber erupted in confused murmurs. Kaveth felt his crystalline heart skip a frequency. Marcus met his eyes across the chamber, and the human smiled. It was not a friendly expression. Dr. Kaveth, Marcus continued, his voice cutting through the noise. Did your archive mention a world called Death World Prime? A planet the architects engineered specifically to produce a species capable of fighting the darkness? A world located at coordinates that correspond exactly to Earth's position? Thevron turned to Kaveth, all 4 eyes demanding answers. Is this true? Did you withhold information from the Council? Kaveth wanted to deny it, to claim ignorance, but the evidence was in his own report. The coordinates were there for anyone who cared to check. He had underestimated humanity, assumed they wouldn't know their own world's history. He had been catastrophically wrong. Marcus didn't wait for Kaveth's response. He activated his own holographic display, and the chamber fell silent as new images appeared. These were from Earth, from a facility buried deep beneath Antarctic ice, from an archive that mirrored the one Kaveth had found, but contained far more complete information. We found this 200 years ago, Marcus said, his voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. The architects left it for us. A message for when we were ready to understand what we are. They told us everything, Dr. Kaveth. Everything you found and everything you chose to hide. They told us why Earth is the way it is. They told us why we are the way we are. And they told us what we were created to do. The hologram showed the architect's laboratory, the genetic engineering on a scale that made Council science look primitive. It showed Earth in its early stages, a world deliberately designed to maximize evolutionary pressure. It showed the careful seeding of aggressive DNA templates, the environmental controls that ensured constant challenge, the monitoring systems that watched humanity's development over 200 millennia. We are not a natural species, Marcus said, and his voice held no shame, only statement of fact. We are a weapon. The architects built us from the ground up, taking the most aggressive traits from across the galaxy and refining them in a crucible that would kill any other species. They made us persistent and adaptable. They made us pack-bonding and tribal. They made us capable of extreme violence and extreme cooperation. They made us able to survive anywhere, fight anything, overcome any obstacle. They made us exactly what was needed to fight the consuming darkness. The chamber exploded in chaos. Representatives shouted in dozens of languages, the translation matrix struggling to keep pace. Accusations flew, demands for explanation, calls for humanity's immediate expulsion from Council space. Marcus stood silent through it all, waiting for the storm to pass, his face showing neither concern nor satisfaction. Thevron finally restored order by pounding his gavel hard enough to crack the podium. Ambassador Zhang, are you confirming that humanity has known about this archive? About your designed origins for 2 centuries? That you have been concealing this information throughout your entire membership in the Council? Marcus nodded slowly. We have. We discovered the archive shortly after we developed the technology to reach Antarctica's depths. We spent 50 years studying it, understanding it, coming to terms with what it meant. Then we spent another 150 years preparing, building infrastructure, developing technologies, positioning ourselves for this moment. Everything we have done since joining the Council has been in service of one goal: ensuring we would be ready when the darkness returned. You lied to us, the Cathari ambassador hissed, her fur bristling with rage. You pretended to be weak, primitive, harmless. You infiltrated our civilization under false pretenses. We didn't lie, Marcus corrected gently. We simply didn't volunteer information you weren't ready to hear. We told you we came from a harsh world. We told you we were new to galactic society. We told you we wanted to learn from more advanced species. All of that was true. We just didn't explain why our world was harsh or what we were learning or what we planned to do with that knowledge. He paused, letting the words sink in. You saw what you wanted to see. A weak species, technologically backward, eager to please. You never asked the right questions. You never wondered why a species from such a deadly world would develop space travel at all, let alone so quickly. You never questioned why our population growth was so aggressive, or why we colonized hostile environments that other species avoided. You saw us as amusing primitives, and we let you believe it. Thevron's voice was cold. What are you, then? If not the species you claim to be. Marcus's expression hardened. We are exactly what the architects designed us to be. We are survivors. We are warriors. We are the species that evolution and engineering built to fight impossible wars and win. Our entire civilization, our culture, our history. Every aspect of what makes us human exists because the architects needed something that could face the consuming darkness and not break. He activated another display, showing human military installations that the Council had never known existed. Fleets of warships hidden in asteroid fields. Weapons platforms disguised as mining operations. Training facilities on worlds the Council thought were simple agricultural colonies. Millions of humans who claimed to be civilians but were actually soldiers waiting for orders. This is what we really are, Marcus said. The Council gasped at the scale of it. Earth alone had more military force than 10 Council worlds combined, and humanity had colonized 40 systems. We stopped pretending to be weak decades ago. We just made sure you never noticed. Our explorers were scouts. Our traders were intelligence gatherers. Our scientists were studying your defenses. Our diplomats, like me, were ensuring you never saw the threat until we were ready to reveal it. Why? Thevron demanded. Why hide? Why not simply tell us the truth? Because you would have done exactly what you're doing now, Marcus replied. You would have panicked. You would have tried to restrict us, control us, perhaps even eliminate us. You would have seen us as a threat rather than the defense force we were created to be. The architects knew this would happen. They warned us in their archive that other species would fear us, that we would have to hide our true nature until the moment came when hiding was no longer necessary. And that moment is now, Kaveth asked, finding his voice. Marcus nodded. That moment is now. The darkness is coming. In 3 months, reality will begin fracturing at the galactic rim. In 6 months, the first inhabited systems will fall. In a year, the consuming darkness will reach Council core worlds. You cannot stop it with your technology or your tactics. The architects, with all their advancement, could barely drive it back. You have no chance alone. The chamber fell silent. Every representative understood what Marcus was saying, what he was offering, and what it would cost. But we can stop it, Marcus continued. Humanity was designed for this exact war. We have studied the architects' data. We have developed weapons and strategies specifically for fighting an enemy that exists partially outside normal reality. We have trained for 50 generations, passing down knowledge and preparing for a war our ancestors knew would come. We are ready. The question is whether you are ready to accept our help. Thevron's voice shook slightly. What are you proposing? Marcus's answer was blunt. Military authority. Humanity assumes command of all defensive operations. Your fleets follow our orders. Your resources are allocated according to our strategic needs. Your governments cooperate fully with our requirements. In exchange, we fight the darkness. We use everything the architects gave us, everything we have built, everything we are, to protect this galaxy. You want us to surrender our sovereignty, the Vexthari representative said, his voice thick with disbelief. No, Marcus replied. I want you to survive. Sovereignty means nothing if you're dead. The darkness doesn't care about your governments or your laws or your pride. It only cares about consuming. And it will consume you unless you let us do what we were created to do. He activated one final hologram, showing footage recovered from the architect's archive. The images were horrific beyond description. Worlds being torn apart as reality fractured around them. Civilizations of billions reduced to screaming chaos as the darkness fed on their consciousness. Space itself becoming twisted and wrong, light bending in impossible ways, time flowing backward and forward simultaneously. The consuming darkness was not just an enemy. It was the end of everything, wrapped in a form that mortal minds could barely comprehend. "This is what happens if we fail," Marcus said quietly. "This is what the architects faced. This is why they sacrificed everything to create us. They didn't want weapons. They wanted survivors. They wanted a species too stubborn to die, too aggressive to surrender, too adaptable to be destroyed. They wanted humanity." The chamber remained silent for a long moment. Then slowly the Miralan ambassador stood. Her species was small and peaceful, with only 2 worlds to their name. She had been one of the few who befriended humanity when they first joined the council. "I vote to accept Ambassador Zhang's proposal," she said, her voice clear and steady. "The evidence is undeniable. The threat is real, and humanity has been honest about what they are, even if they delayed that honesty. I trust them to protect us because they were literally designed for this purpose." Other ambassadors began to stand. The Talshi, who lived in mobile ocean ships. The Weavers, artificial intelligences who respected efficiency above all else. The Nexari, too new to council politics to let pride interfere with survival. One by one, species voted to accept human military authority. But not all. 12 species refused, their representatives storming from the chamber in rage and fear. They would not submit to human control. They would defend themselves using their own methods. They would maintain their sovereignty even if it meant facing the darkness alone. Marcus watched them go without expression. Then he turned to the remaining representatives. Those who stayed would form the core of the defense. Those who left would be remembered but not mourned. "To those who have chosen to trust us," Marcus said, "I make this promise. Humanity will fight with everything we have. We will use every weapon, every tactic, every soldier. We will be ruthless and brutal and uncompromising, because the darkness demands nothing less. Many of us will die. Many of you will die. But we will win because losing is not an option. The architects created us for this. We will not fail them." Devron stood, his forearms raised in formal salute. "The Council yields military authority to humanity. May the architect's wisdom guide us all." Marcus returned the salute. Then he activated his command network, sending orders that had been prepared and waiting for 200 years. Across human space, the transformation began. Civilian ships dropped their disguises, revealing weapon systems and armor. Colony worlds activated defense grids that had been hidden beneath farms and cities. Soldiers emerged from populations that the Council had thought peaceful. Research facilities unveiled technologies that shouldn't exist. Quantum weapons and reality anchors and shields designed to hold against enemies that existed outside normal physics. The galaxy watched in growing horror and reluctant hope as humanity revealed what it truly was. Not the friendly newcomers they pretended to be, but something far older and far more dangerous. A weapon forged by the greatest civilization in history, tempered in Earth's crucible, sharpened by 200,000 years of survival against impossible odds. The consuming darkness was coming. But now, for the first time, it would face something it had never encountered before. It would face humanity, united and unleashed, fighting the war they were created to win. Marcus stood in the empty council chamber after the others had left, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, beyond the galactic rim, reality was fracturing. The enemy was coming. The war was beginning, and humanity was finally, terrifyingly, beautifully ready. He smiled, thinking of his children on Earth, learning to fight before they could walk. He thought of the soldiers training in secret facilities, preparing for combat that would make historical wars look like children's games. He thought of the scientists working on weapons that bent the laws of physics. He thought of the pilots and the strategists and the engineers, and the billions of humans who had spent their entire lives preparing for a war their great-grandparents had known was coming. The architects had called them the Crucible's children. They had designed them to be weapons. They had created them to fight the unbeatable enemy. Now the galaxy would learn what that meant. Now the consuming darkness would learn what it meant to face humanity. And now, Marcus thought as he left the chamber, we stop pretending and start winning. The countdown had reached 0. The war had begun, and humanity was no longer hiding.